I'm Jill Galloway. I am Coordinator of Instructional Technology for Irving ISD, and I am also a Google certified teacher who has drank the Google Kool-Aid, and now I never want to go back. I'm very passionate about Google Apps for Education and what it can do for kids, and it's a tool that I think is completely different than just your run-of-the-mill tools that you just kind of add in or substitute a paper-based activity for. When you use Google Apps for Education, it truly will transform how you do things in your classroom, and it changes it for the better. Great, because what I'm going to do today is kind of talk about what Google Apps for Education is, and then show you some little tips and tricks that will kind of help you use it in your classroom. And if you guys have any questions while I'm going through this, there's actually a questions link on my website, and you can actually type in your questions in the parking lot. It's the parking lot of enlightenment. You will be enlightened when you go there. So you can type your question. Please, put who's asking the question, and then I have an answer in an answered by column. Well, of course, I can stand up here and provide you all of these answers. I'm certainly happy to do that, but somebody in the room might already know the answer to the question. So if you go into the parking lot and you see somebody's asked a question that you know the answer to, feel free to go in and answer it. And I will definitely go in and answer any questions that are unanswered for you. And you can feel free to raise your hand and stop me if you want, but that is there just in case I've gone on to something else, or maybe you just want some more clarification. I'll try to keep tabs on that. Okay, so what is Google Apps? Well, basically Google Apps is a suite of software tools that help foster collaboration, communication. It kind of provides 21st century tools to our learners, but it does so in a way that we can customize it and make it safe and secure for the people who use it. So I've kind of heard from several different districts where a lot of people are kind of hesitant to provide students email, or maybe they're hesitant to, they want their kids to be able to email, but they want to be able to, maybe just email within the classroom. They want to kind of limit that. Maybe they want kids to be able to create websites. That's a great outlet. Kids love creating websites, but maybe we don't want to put it out there for the public. Well, Google Apps for Education lets you customize all of that. So you can still provide the tools that kids need, because let's face it, kids, they need to learn how to communicate via email. We all communicate via email every day, and that's the world that they are going to be moving into. So we need to give them experience communicating in written form via email. Well, we can do that now, but we don't have to just, make it a free-for-all. We can still let them have those experiences. And I think as educators, obviously, we definitely need to teach the content. But personally, I think it's equally important, and in some cases more important, to teach them life skills that they're going to use when they leave us. Because once they leave us, they're on their own. So I think that if we're not providing tools such as these for our kids, we could be doing them a disservice. Okay, I have a bunch of tutorials on here. I'm not going to go over all of these, but I am going to kind of go over specific tasks or specific neat little tips and tricks as I go through the Google Apps for Education suite. So that's what we're going to do next. A lot of this content up here is for your reference. As you leave, you can certainly come back here and refer to it as much as you want. Okay, so we have obviously Google Docs, or how many people in here have opted into Google Drive? Okay. Well, Google Drive is very new, and my Google Docs might look a little bit different because I did opt into Google Drive. Well, what the heck is Google Drive, you're probably wondering. Well, Google Drive basically is kind of a rebranding, I guess, of Google Docs. Docs will now be called Drive. You will be upgraded to free 5 gigabytes of storage space, which is amazing. And it puts a folder on your machine so you can actually organize your things and see them in a folder structure, kind of like Dropbox does. So if you're familiar with Dropbox, it's pretty similar to that, except the free space is 2.5 times. You get actually 5 gigs of free space. So, mine might look a little different, and that is why. And I'll show you in just a second a resource that will explain this to you. But this is your Google Docs. It allows for real-time collaboration. In real time, if people were typing in our parking lot, we would all be able to see in real time what is going on here. So that alone tackles a very important 21st century skill, collaboration. Kids need to be able to work together. It is not very common to be placed into the workforce where you're just all alone in your own little world and you're doing your work and that's it. No, we work on projects together. We collaborate. We need to be able to do so efficiently, and Google Docs allows us to do that. When you're using Google Docs with your kids, something that I highly recommend is creating digital Dropboxes. This blog post actually tells you how to set up Dropboxes. So, well, what are Dropboxes? Well, basically, you're creating a folder that students will use to turn in work. Same problem that when I first became a teacher, that was, I think, a chapter in one of my books, organizing your classroom, where are kids going to turn in their papers? We had to make sure I had all my baskets for each class. And, well, same thing, except now we have digital files, so we don't have those hard pieces of paper. But Google Docs, if we set it up right, will organize it all for you. So you can create a folder or a collection, as they call it. You can create a collection, and what I highly recommend is having your students create that collection for your class, and then when they share that folder with you, or that collection with you, whenever I say collection, just think folder. Basically the same thing. Anything they put in that folder, you automatically have access to. So your students do not have to share every single file they create. If they just put it in that folder, it's kind of like they're just walking to the front of the room and sticking that piece of paper in the basket. Same thing. You can do that 2 ways. So your students can create Dropboxes to turn things in. As a teacher, you would create a collection to, send stuff to the kids. So you could create one folder or one collection, share it with all of your students one time, so you don't have to worry about sharing it, every time you create something. And then anytime you put that document in that folder, your kids can see it. This blog post talks about how to have your students set up a Dropbox to turn things in. But you can follow the same procedure and share it with your students. And down here, there's at the bottom, you'll see some other other ways you can do it. But so, we have our two-way communication, communicating from the student to the teacher, and then from the teacher to the student. And you can do all of that with collections. Because that's something that I hear quite a bit is how, they think that Google Apps is going to take additional time out of our day. And obviously we know every instructional moment is golden. We don't really have that time to to give. But it actually saves you time because you just set it up once on the front end and then you're done. And the next piece of information is how to set up contact groups. That makes it even easier. So if you set up a group with all of your kids in there, then you just share it with that group. So if you did want to share a Google site, Google Docs, email, if you have email available with, turned on for your district, You can do that all with that group. So you just have to create the group once, and it works across all of the products. You can actually embed a discussion board into a Google site with a Google group. So what I did, and this is the first time we've really been testing it out in our district, but we're doing our 8th grade technology literacy assessment right now, and I've created this site with this discussion board. So as our ITSs go through the process, any kind of tips, questions, anything they have is posted on this discussion board. So next year when we do this all over again, it's all there for us. I know there are lots of things that we implement only once a year, and so sometimes, you know, we get into it and we're like, oh yeah, I forgot last year we encountered that. Well, now we're not going to forget. I'm going to keep all of this up here so we can take these considerations into consideration next year. And all I did is created a Google group. That's all I did. And then once the group's created, there's a little Google group embed gadget in Google Sites. You can just embed that discussion board right there. And again, there's a link here to a tutorial that shows you how to create those groups. You can actually do it many different ways, but one way I've gotten a lot of feedback from teachers is you can actually have kids submit their information to you, so you already have a file with their name and email address, and it goes over it in the tutorial. But once they do that, you just take that file, you import it into Google Contacts, pop it into a group, and it's really easy. So it doesn't really take you much time, and they just have to have a Google Apps account, and it really depends on how you set it up. Like for instance, with Google Apps for Education, there are Google Docs, which includes forms, spreadsheets, presentations, drawings. And then there's Google Sites, which allows you to create websites. There are Google Contacts. There are Google Groups. Basically, you can opt in or out to any one of those. So if you want your students to have Google Docs, but maybe your district isn't really ready to give your kids email addresses, they can turn email off, and it works just fine. In fact, that's how we have it set up for our staff. We did not want our staff to have multiple inboxes. I mean, if you want, you can actually set it up that way. You can set it up to deliver email to both places if you want. But we decided just to turn mail off for staff, and so basically when the staff logs in, they just don't have the mail link up at the top, but they have everything else. Docs, calendar I forgot. Those are some of the basic things and basic apps in the core suite. And then you can actually, I'll show you in just a second, but you can actually add in more services if you want as well in the apps marketplace. I'm going to talk about Google Forms. Okay, I wonder if we have any more. We have 43 respondents. But what I did for this little survey right here is I created a Google form. Very, very simple to do. It's a type of document. Just go to Create Form, and you can add in as many kinds of questions as you want. Or as many questions, but in terms of question types, you have different types: text, paragraph text, multiple choice, and so forth. I'm not going to spend time going, this isn't a Google Forms how-to, but I am going to show you some of the things that kind of work in conjunction with it and how you can make Google Forms work for you. So you can actually make Google Forms grade the quizzes and whatever for you. So again, saves you valuable time. There are actually two sections on my website that kind of cover the self-grading quizzes. One is a product called Flubaroo. I hear it pronounced many different ways, but it is actually a little add-in that you can use to grade your things for you, communicate with the kids. I mean, it's basically somebody wrote a script and kind of implemented it, and this was made, I believe, by a teacher. Somebody just created it and decided to put it out there for everybody to use. So you can actually use that to have your test quiz graded for you. Pretty neat. Let's see. And then you don't even need that if you don't want to, but if you're interested in nerding out and making some formulas in an a Google spreadsheet, or maybe you just want one that's already created and you just want to kind of modify it, there are some tutorials in there, and there's actually, the last link has some pre-populated formulas in a template, so you can use that as a starting point. But basically, you just create your assessment, and then based on the formulas that are in the spreadsheet, you can have it grade it for you. Anything in your Google Drive folder, so I mentioned earlier, I'll just go ahead and show you. Here's my Google Drive folder right here. All of these documents and folders are an exact copy of the same documents that are in my Google Docs, now called Drive, just to confuse you. It's now called Drive. But so not only did they add a new feature for you, they renamed one that you probably came to know and love. So keep you on your toes, they will. But see, you'll notice now up at the top, my Docs doesn't say Docs, it says Drive. So all of that stuff is already in here. In this new Google Drive, formerly known as Google Docs, or still known as Google Docs to some, everything in my drive is what goes onto that folder. Okay. Everything shared with me is now separate. So the Google Drive doesn't include anything shared with me unless I want it to. If I want it to, no fear, I just take this and I drag it into my drive. Now it will show up in my drive folder. Google Voice. Does anybody know what Google Voice is? Okay. Well, I love Google Voice, but I think Google Voice is one of those secret tools that a lot of people don't really know about. I'm not going to sign into it because I have messages in there. But let me tell you what it does. It actually provides you your own free phone number. You can have it ring to your real phone number, or you can just, let me step back. I just get so excited about this every time I talk about it. When you sign up for Google Voice, you can sign up for Google Voice with an existing phone number, or you can create a whole new number. I highly recommend creating a whole new number, because if you don't, then you don't get all the features. The Google Voice voicemail can take over your existing voicemail. Like, I love my, seeing my visual voicemail here. So I just had it separate. But there's a benefit to that, because now you have a phone number you can share with parents, other people at school, without having to give out your normal phone number. What else does it do? Well, you can actually control when you're going to take calls from that number. You can say, I only want this number active, for this period of time, and then once, after 6 o'clock or whatever, they're going to go to voicemail. You can have, there's so many different ways you can set it up. You can you can receive text messages and send text messages from your number. Any voicemails you get, it transcribes them. So any voicemail, it actually has it typed out. That's why I'm not going to open it up, because it has transcriptions of all my voicemails, and I might have some sensitive information in there. You actually can just use your phone. That's all I use. So I just use my phone. But I haven't even told you my favorite thing about Google Voice yet. All of those voicemails are sent to you as an attachment in Google Voice, and you can then embed that in a Google site. So basically, it's a way to get voice recordings onto a Google site. It gives you a little player. It just shows up on your page. You can embed it anywhere. There are so many different ways you can use this in education. I know in our district we're constantly fighting the issue of students might not have computers at home. They just might not have computers at home. Does that mean we have to just, throw out technology and say, nope, they've got to do paper-based things? Absolutely not. they probably have a telephone, at least one in the family. A lot of them, you know, each have their own now. Have them call your Google Voice number. They can call in and leave messages. If you're a speech teacher, depending on how clearly they're enunciating, you can gauge that by the transcription. Another way to create, to add audio in a Google site is to use this free tool called Vocaroo. There's actually a little tutorial that shows you how to do that. But with Vocaroo, I can just click to record. I don't need an account. Kids don't need an account. They just go to the website, they click to record. When they're done with the recording, it asks them what do they want to do. Do they want to email the recording to somebody, or do they want to post it on a website? If you choose that, it gives you the embed code. So then I could then have little recordings posted on my Google site. Let's think of some awesome ways. How can we use that in the classroom? What are some ways we could take advantage of being able to post audio recordings onto a Google site? This Google Apps Learning Center right here, these are great resources to actually go and learn about some of the features of Google Docs, Google Sites, any of these tools. These are all resources put out by Google, and they get very darn specific. So anything you want to know, it's probably in there. This next page is just some tips and tricks. These, again, are put out by Google. The other one of my favorites is Aviary. Aviary allows you to do online photo editing, online audio editing. You can add that into Google Apps. So then kids don't need an Aviary account. It is free, Aviary is. Now, some of the apps in the Apps Marketplace are not free, but many of them are. So take advantage of them. And I don't know, am I about to run out of time? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, but if you have any questions, feel free to come up and talk to me or email me, hit me up on Twitter. I have my Twitter handle up there. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Feel free to email me after the fact. If you get back to your district and you're like, I wish I would have asked that, just email me. I'm happy to help. I get emails all the time about this stuff, so you're not going to bother me. But I hope you learned a few tips and tricks in here, and thank you all for coming.